A millionaire businesswoman faces racism, sabotage, and humiliation in her own company just for being black, but the end surprises everyone. Clara Thompson held the microphone tightly, the cold sweat in her hands contrasting with the determined posture she displayed. The stage lights illuminated her face as hundreds of eyes watched her. She knew what was coming. She had felt this tension before, that silence filled with expectations disguised as curiosity. Deep down, it wasn't just curiosity, it was judgment. "Well, now tell me, how many times have you seen a black woman on a stage like this?" she asked, smiling with the same calmness as a poker player hiding their most valuable cards. The silence in the room was overwhelming. Some looked away, others pressed their lips together, uncomfortable. Clara continued, "It's rare, isn't it? And rarity in this world is often mistaken for weakness, for luck, for something temporary." She paused strategically, letting the impact of her words echo in the room. "But I'm not an exception. I'm a trend that's only going to grow." The applause was intense, almost forced by some, while others clapped with genuine enthusiasm. Clara had learned to play with people's expectations. She knew that every time she stepped on stage, she wasn't just selling her company, she was selling herself. To many, she was a reluctant example, a black woman who became a millionaire in a white, male-dominated corporate world. And to others, she was a threat to the status quo. As she left the stage, her mind drifted back to the beginning of her journey. She had grown up on the streets of Detroit, in a small house with broken windows and a leaky roof every time it rained. There she learned to fight, not just for survival, but for something greater. Her nights were spent studying, imagining what a future in technology could offer. At 17, Clara earned a full scholarship to one of the most prestigious computer science universities in the country, an extraordinary achievement, but no one talked about it. At the university, the looks were always the same. "You're here because of a quota." She heard that more times than she could count. Determined to prove her worth, Clara stood out in every project she could. She wasn't just good at what she did, she was brilliant. And by the time she graduated, she had an ambitious idea in her head: to create a company that would not only lead technological innovation, but also solve one of humanity's greatest challenges: sustainability. That's how Thompson Innovations was born. The Clara who had faced prejudice in the classroom was now leading one of the most innovative tech companies. But despite her success, one uncomfortable truth remained. Her place at the top was still constantly questioned. After the speech, Clara was immediately surrounded by investors, journalists, and curious onlookers, each one looking for something different: a piece of her attention, a chance to profit from her success, or deep down, just trying to understand how she had made it there. Jack Williams, her partner and only true friend in that room, approached her with a smile. "You really know how to make a crowd uncomfortable," he said with a laugh. "Well, someone has to," Clara replied, relaxing a bit. Jack was one of the few people she trusted. White, blonde, and charismatic, he was the face many expected to see at the helm of Thompson Innovations. But he always made it clear that Clara was the one really running the show. "We've got a few important investors to talk to. But first, there's someone who wants to meet you," Jack said, pointing to a man approaching. The man had graying hair, wearing an expensive suit and a sharp smile. He extended his hand to Clara. "Miss Thompson, I must say I was impressed with your presentation." "Thank you," Clara replied with a polite smile. She already knew where this was going. She had seen this type of man countless times: superficial respect, but always with a touch of condescension. "It must be very challenging for a woman, especially a woman like you, to stand out in this field. A real achievement. Have you ever thought about, let's say, bringing someone with more experience to co-lead the company? Someone who could take some of the pressure off?" There it was, the insinuation that, no matter how brilliant Clara was, there was still an expectation that she couldn't carry the weight alone. She smiled, but her eyes said something else. "With all due respect, sir, who do you think is leading right now?" she replied, keeping her tone firm. The man hesitated, his smile faltering for a second before he composed himself. He laughed lightly, embarrassed. Of course, just a suggestion. After all, building a company like yours, well, it's truly remarkable." Clara simply nodded, watching as he walked away. She looked around the room, the weight of reality settling in once again. People applauded her success, but behind the smiles, Clara knew many were waiting for her to fail. She had always known this. Always knew that, deep down, they believed someone like her didn't belong here. But Clara didn't care. If no one was making space for her, then she would make it herself. Because, contrary to what they believed, she wasn't just a woman on the rise. She was a quiet revolution. And soon, the world would realize that. As she prepared for the next meeting, Clara felt a restlessness growing inside her. Something bigger was coming, and although she didn't know exactly what it was yet, she was sure of one thing. Her fight was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since the last event, and the pace at Thompson Innovations was as fast as ever. Clara, as usual, arrived at the office early, organizing her thoughts to face another day of negotiations and strategic decisions. She knew her company was at a critical point, with new products ready to launch and competitors paying closer attention to every move she made. But something unexpected would happen that day, changing everything. Just before lunch, as Clara was reviewing financial reports in her office, a notification popped up on her computer, an invitation. It wasn't just another corporate event, but the most prestigious annual conference in the tech sector, the Global Tech Summit. Clara knew this was the biggest stage a company could be on to solidify itself as a true leader in innovation. A deal made there could easily take Thompson Innovations to the next level, putting it among the tech giants. She opened the invitation and read it carefully. Dear Miss Clara Thompson, we are pleased to invite you to present your company at this year's Global Tech Summit. Your company has been selected as one of the finalists for the Sustainable Solutions contract with Green Core Technologies, valued in the billions. Your presentation will be broadcast globally to an audience of investors, entrepreneurs, and journalists from around the world. Clara felt her heart race. This was the kind of opportunity that could change careers, cement legacies. The contract with Green Core Technologies would mean not only astronomical profits, but also global recognition for her pioneering work in technological sustainability. However, she also knew it would be fierce competition, and many wouldn't see her as a legitimate contender. Almost automatically, her mind filled with memories of the times she had been underestimated. From the subtle comments about her success being the result of diversity policies to the insinuations that her company was just a passing promise. They always think I'm here by accident, Clara thought. But this time, she was determined to prove once again that her place at the top wasn't an exception, but the result of her talent and vision. She called Jack into her office to discuss the invitation. As her partner, Jack knew how much this meant to Clara, and the sparkle in his eyes when he saw the invitation confirmed that. This is amazing, Clara. It's the kind of deal that can change everything, he said excitedly. But you know the competition is going to be tough. We're talking about massive companies with decades of experience. And frankly, you know they're going to try to take you down, especially now that you're in this position. Clara nodded, knowing exactly what Jack was talking about. Prejudice wasn't an unknown threat, but she was ready to face any adversity. Jack, however, seemed more worried than excited. I've heard some rumors about the other finalists, he said, closing the door behind him. They're playing dirty. Word is that they've already started spreading rumors that you're only on the list because of diversity pressure. They're planting doubts about your abilities. This didn't surprise Clara, but the weight of those words was no less painful. She knew every move she made would be scrutinized under a magnifying glass, with people waiting for any mistake to confirm she didn't belong in this world. I've dealt with this before, Jack. Let them talk. What matters is what I'm going to present on that stage. No one can take that from me. Just be careful, Jack replied. I know you're capable, but these guys don't play around. Any gap they find, they'll use against you. Clara knew Jack was right. The conference would be a lion's den, and as always, people waiting for her downfall were lurking. But she also knew that the chance to be at the center of that stage, with the whole world watching, was something she couldn't pass up. Later that day, as she headed home, Clara reflected on what was to come. She had already accomplished so much, but the truth was she still fought every day to be recognized as a leader and innovator, not as an exception. Every victory of hers seemed like an affront to those who believed someone like her shouldn't be there. The Green Corps contract could change that for good. It would be the final blow, the ultimate proof that her place at the top wasn't due to luck or opportunity, but merit. When she entered her apartment, she felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She knew that what happened at the conference could define the future of her company and her own story. With that in mind, Clara began to carefully plan her presentation. There was no room for mistakes, and she knew that better than anyone. Clara could feel the weight of expectation in every glance as the main hall of the Global Tech Summit buzzed with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. She was just minutes away from stepping onto the stage, from delivering the presentation that could change the course of Thomson Innovations forever. The contract with Green Corps Technologies wasn't just a billion-dollar deal. It was the validation of everything she had fought for. But more than that, Clara knew that, in the eyes of many in that room, this was the final test, the proof that she belonged in this world. She adjusted the tie on her blazer and gave one last look in the backstage mirror. Her reflection appeared calm, controlled, but inside her heart beat like war drums. Over the years, she had learned to wear confidence as armor. But there was something different about that night, something in the air. And as much as she tried to ignore it, the feeling lingered. The next presenter will be Clara Thomson, CEO of Thomson Innovations. The host's voice echoed through the hall, snapping Clara back to the moment. As she approached the stage, she heard whispers, low voices cutting through the air like knives. Those conversations were never made directly to her, but always lurking on the sidelines, where prejudice disguised itself as casual talk. Will she really make it? You know why she's here, right? Diversity is trendy. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, trying to block out the venom. When she opened them again, her expression was steely. The stage lights were bright, blinding. She climbed the steps with firm strides, fully aware that every move, every word would be scrutinized. That's how it had been since she entered this world. It was always like that. The future of sustainable technology depends on bold solutions. Thomson Innovations, she began, her voice clear and strong. With flawless slides and graphs, Clara unfolded her vision with a passion that didn't just convince, it inspired. People in the audience seemed to lean forward, captivated by the potential to change the world through artificial intelligence and sustainability. For a brief moment, Clara believed she was winning, that Thomson Innovations would be seen for what it truly was, a beacon of innovation. But then, an interruption cut through the air like a knife. "Excuse me, Miss Thomson, but this all sounds great in theory, doesn't it?" The voice came from Richard Hale, one of the directors of a rival company. He sat in the front row, his casual tone masking a very clear intention. Clara paused for a second, surprised by his audacity to interrupt. The hall, once silent, suddenly filled with a palpable tension. Richard stood up slowly, microphone in hand. "Sustainability, innovation, big words. But we're here to talk about real business, and real business needs more than just pretty ideas. It needs numbers." Clara kept her eyes locked on him, anger burning inside, but her expression remained steady. She knew he was intentionally trying to destabilize her. But what came next went beyond a simple interruption. "And speaking of numbers," he continued, now pacing slightly as if savoring each word, "we're all wondering, was your company really selected on merit? Or are we just seeing the reflection of those diversity policies that are so popular these days?" Those words felt like a punch to the gut. The air seemed to have been sucked out of the room. Clara felt a wave of heat surge through her body. Her hands, once steady, started to tremble slightly. She looked out at the audience and saw some surprised faces, others expressionless, but no one dared to intervene. "You see," Richard said, a cold smile spreading across his face, "we all know that Thomson Innovations has been making waves. But would we even be here listening to this if you weren't at the top of the inclusion list?" Clara could hardly breathe. She knew prejudice was always lurking, but it had rarely been so cruelly laid bare before an audience of hundreds. And worse, with the whole world watching. It was a public humiliation, calculated and brutal. She wanted to respond. She needed to respond. But what could she say that wouldn't sound defensive? How could she fight against the weight of an accusation that for many was already an unspoken truth? The silence was crushing. Richard continued to smile, knowing he had hit his mark. Clara's moment, the one that should have cemented her career, was unraveling in front of everyone. It was as if the entire room was waiting for her to fall. "With all due respect, Mr. Hale," Clara began, trying to control the voice that threatened to break. "The numbers you're asking about speak for themselves. What Thompson Innovations has achieved so far is the result of hard work and a vision for the future that goes far beyond what's expected. And if being different is a crime, then I'll wear that label proudly." She spoke the words with strength, but the feeling of vulnerability still engulfed her. She knew that despite her response, many in that room had already been swayed by Richard's poison. The humiliation was complete. Even if she finished her presentation, the damage had been done. That seed of doubt planted in everyone's hearts would echo for a long time. The applause when it came was lukewarm, polite, but empty. Clara stepped off the stage with a heavy heart. The world, which for a moment seemed ready to recognize her merit, now closed in around her, full of prejudice, disdain, and doubt. She walked through the halls without meeting anyone's eyes, each step echoing the weight of the humiliation she had just endured. Backstage, her hands shook, and for the first time in a long time, Clara doubted herself. Was Richard right? Was she really only there because of an agenda that had nothing to do with her competence? A stronger voice within quickly silenced that doubt. "No, you got here because you're the best. They're afraid of what you represent." But at that moment, between the stage and the backstage, Clara felt alone. No matter how many achievements she'd stacked up, the world kept waiting and wanting for her to fail. The drive home was a blur of confused thoughts and raw emotions. What should have been the high point of her career, the moment when Clara would finally solidify her position as a leader in tech innovation, had turned into a public nightmare. In the quiet of the car, Richard Hale's words echoed in her mind like an inescapable soundtrack. Inclusion, quotas, trendy politics, all of it weighed on her spirit like an anchor tied to her chest. When Clara walked into her apartment that night, the place that usually brought a sense of peace now felt empty, echoing the loneliness she felt inside. The city outside was still alive, lights flickering, cars passing, but in Clara's heart there was a heavy silence. She sat on the couch, staring at nothing, the flashes of her speech on stage replaying in her mind. The questions, the stares, the cold applause, all of it had become an unsettling soundtrack. She picked up her phone and opened social media. Comments about her presentation were already circulating. Some praised her courage for standing up to Richard. Others, however, questioned if he hadn't raised a valid point. One comment in particular caught her attention. Richard said what everyone was thinking, but no one had the guts to say. This is what happens when you force inclusion. Those who truly deserve it get left out. Clara felt a knot in her stomach. As much as she knew those words came from places of ignorance and prejudice, they had a direct impact on her career and the image of her company. The damage was done. She had been exposed publicly, and now the world questioned if her place on that stage was deserved. The emails began to roll in, and they weren't good news. Jack, as always, was the first to call. "Clara, what happened out there was a trap. Don't let it bring you down. They're playing dirty because they know you're ahead." "Am I? Because it doesn't feel like it, Jack. It feels like everyone believes I'm here because of a diversity agenda, not on merit." Clara responded, frustration spilling into her voice. "These guys play hard because they know you're a threat. Thompson Innovations is on the verge of landing the biggest contract in our history. They'll do whatever it takes to sabotage that." Clara knew Jack was right, but it didn't lessen the pain. The silence of the room consumed her, and the realization that the world seemed to believe Hale's words gnawed at her. "I worked so hard. For what? To be reduced to a label? To be called a quota in front of the entire world? You worked to prove your place is deserved, and you've proven that. Now, we need to think about the next move. We can't let this attack ruin our chances with Greencore," Jack said, trying to bring a more practical perspective. Clara knew Jack was right. She couldn't afford to fall. Not now. But the feeling of vulnerability was overwhelming. She had always faced challenges and prejudices, but never in such a public, cruel way. And now, investors, the media, everyone was questioning her ability to lead. The following week was a real test. The effects of the public humiliation began to materialize even more clearly. Some investors started expressing doubts, not directly, but through questions that put Clara on the defensive. "Clara, I heard the meeting with Greencore might be canceled," Jack said, interrupting an afternoon where she tried unsuccessfully to focus on new projects. "They're starting to cave to the pressure from the competition. It seems Richard and his team are pulling strings behind the scenes." Clara shook her head in disbelief. Greencore was indeed reconsidering. Despite all the work her team had done, doubts about Thompson Innovations were spreading like a silent plague. The same rumors about forced inclusion were now being used as a reason to reevaluate the partnership. Years of hard work, the credibility Clara had earned, everything seemed to be slipping through her fingers. "I can't believe they're backing down because of this," Clara said, her voice filled with frustration. "I'm not what they're saying. I'm not an exception, but it seems no one wants to hear that." "They won't listen unless you make some noise, Clara," Jack replied, his tone serious. "You need to fight back. Show them they can't silence you with these attacks. We need to turn the tide." Clara knew Jack was right. But how? How do you fight a narrative that was already being accepted by so many? A narrative that undermined years of work based on hidden prejudices? What hurt the most was realizing that despite her success, she was still seen as an exception, not as someone who had earned her place on merit. She spent the next few days trying to figure out how to respond. She spoke to her lawyers, explored the possibilities of suing Richard Hale for defamation, but she knew that would only prolong the focus on the humiliation he had caused. No, she needed something more. Something that would take back control of the narrative. Something that would show everyone that her journey was more than a mere exception. That she was a leader, an innovator, and that her success didn't depend on others' opinions. As Clara reflected, an idea began to take shape. She couldn't just respond. She needed to expose the entire racist and prejudiced structure that had tried to bring her down. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about something much bigger. And in realizing that, the flame inside Clara started to grow again. She wouldn't let Hale and his allies win. If they were playing dirty, she would play even harder. Because this fight wasn't just for Thompson Innovations. It was for everyone like her who constantly had to prove themselves in a world that wanted to see them fail. With her gaze fixed on the horizon, Clara knew what she had to do. And it wouldn't be small. She was about to turn the game around. The idea of turning the game around burned in Clara's mind like an uncontrollable flame. The days following the public confrontation were exhausting, but not because of the work itself. It was the weight of doubt, the constant tension, that consumed her. Clara knew she was at a disadvantage, but she also knew that, to survive and thrive, she needed something solid, a weapon against those determined to bring her down. She spent tireless days studying the competition, trying to understand what Richard Hale and his allies were really plotting. There was something behind all that arrogance, something deeper than the open attacks and malicious whispers. She could feel it. But without proof, any move she made could be seen as a sign of weakness. She had to be careful. She had to be strategic. One particularly cold morning, Jack walked into her office, holding his phone with a tense expression. "Clara, you need to see this." She looked up from a pile of reports and took the phone from his hands. On the screen, a leaked email from Hale's communications team was circulating on social media, causing a storm among journalists and industry commentators. The content was direct and devastating. The strategy is clear. Discredit Thompson at the conference. The inclusion narrative has worked in our favor so far. If public opinion keeps doubting her competence, we'll be able to derail any chance she has of securing the Greencore deal. Keep pushing the forced diversity rumors and be prepared for any public reaction from her. Clara felt a mix of anger and relief. She knew there was more to it. Finally, her suspicions were confirmed. Richard Hale and his team were deliberately orchestrating a campaign to discredit her. The public attack at the Global Tech Summit had been just the tip of the iceberg. They had been playing dirty from the start. "How did this get here?" she asked, her eyes never leaving the screen. "It was an anonymous source. Some journalist published it on social media." "It's blowing up in the media right now, Clara," Jack replied. "But the impact is still divided. Some people are furious, but others are treating it as a business strategy. They don't see the gravity of it." Clara threw her phone on the table, her mind racing. Now she had proof. Richard Hale wasn't just a malicious rival. He was deliberately sabotaging her reputation to ensure Thompson Innovations failed. And he did it for one reason. She was a threat. Not just as a rising black woman, but because her competence, vision, and success challenged the entire system he and others like him upheld. But how should she use this information? Suing Hale would be a natural reaction, but not necessarily the most effective at the moment. She needed to be smarter than that. Something that would shake the foundations of the corporate world. Something that would expose the deeply rooted racism in the upper echelons of technology. As she pondered, an idea began to take shape. Clara knew she needed to confront this issue head-on, and not alone. It was time to rally allies. The plan forming in her mind wasn't just about exposing Hale. It was about turning the tables in a way no one could ignore. That night, Clara called an emergency meeting with her lawyers and media advisors. The conference room was packed, and everyone looked tense. They knew the weight of what was at stake. When Clara entered, the buzz ceased immediately. She took a deep breath before starting. "As you know, our company's actions have been attacked publicly. Rumors, personal attacks, a real smear campaign has been mounted against me and Thompson Innovations. But now we have proof that all of this was orchestrated." She paused, observing the reactions in the room. The lawyers looked with a mix of concern and curiosity. Clara continued, "Richard Hale's team is behind this. They were deliberately spreading rumors about my capability, all to ensure we didn't get the Green Corps contract. We're not talking about a simple business dispute. We're talking about calculated sabotage." A murmur ran through the room. Clara picked up the leaked email and displayed it on the conference room screen, letting everyone read it. The indignation was visible on her colleagues' faces. "Suing Hale for defamation is an option," said one of the lawyers. "But it will take time, and the immediate impact would be small." Clara nodded. "I know. That's why we need a different approach. I want to use this to expose something bigger. This isn't just an attack on me or Thompson Innovations. It's an attack on everyone who, like me, are constantly discredited, underestimated, and attacked because of who we are. This is a fight against a system that allows racism and prejudice to be used as business tools." The room fell silent for a moment. Clara's words carried a weight far greater than anyone had anticipated. This wasn't just about winning a contract. It was about initiating a profound change. "So, what's the plan?" asked Jack, who was sitting next to her, clearly ready to take action. Clara took a deep breath. "We're going to take this to the media, not just focusing on the leaked email, but on the entire campaign of discrimination in this sector. We're going to expose every detail, every time we've been underestimated because of color, gender, or any other reason. We're going to turn this into a public discussion. I want them to feel the impact." She knew the plan was bold and risky. Exposing herself this way meant putting her reputation and future on the line. Once again. But Clara felt there was no other way. She wouldn't be a passive victim of a prejudiced campaign. She was willing to fight and put the whole world on watch. "I know this might generate retaliation, but if we stay quiet now, we're allowing them to win. They'll keep doing this, with other companies, with other people. This needs to stop, and we're going to be the ones to do it." Everyone in the room nodded slowly, absorbing the magnitude of what was coming. Clara looked around, feeling the growing support from her team. She knew this would be the toughest moment of her career, but also the most important. The sun had barely risen when Clara walked into Thompson Innovations that morning. The sky, still tinged with orange, reflected the urgency she felt. Today, everything would change. The plan she had been formulating over the past days would finally take shape. It wouldn't just be a response, but a calculated offensive designed to change the game forever. She knew the decision to expose Richard Hale and his sabotage campaign would put her company under an even greater spotlight. Many already viewed her with suspicion, and some even expected her to fail. But Clara had no choice. The leaked email had been the proof she needed. A window to expose not just Hale, but the entire system of prejudice that permeated the industry. This was the moment to reverse the narrative and turn humiliation into a public battle for justice. The meeting room was full of energy. Lawyers, media advisors, and her trusted team were already waiting, ready to execute the plan. Jack, as always, was by her side, reviewing strategies. "Is everything ready?" Clara asked, her tone firm but with a spark of nervousness. She knew there would be no turning back from now on. "Everything is ready," Jack replied. "We're exposing Hale and his team today. The reporters are waiting for the press conference. But Clara, you know this could cause a storm, right? They won't stand still while you attack them." Clara nodded. She knew the retaliation would be fierce. She was about to challenge directly one of the most powerful men in the industry, and that wouldn't go unanswered. But she couldn't back down. Not now. Every decision she had made led her to this point, and she was ready for the consequences. More than ever, she knew she wasn't just fighting for herself, but for every marginalized and underestimated person in this system. "I don't care what they try to do. They crossed a line, Jack, and now it's my turn to show the world who they really are." The press conference was scheduled for early afternoon. The atmosphere was a mix of expectation and tension. Thompson Innovations had done meticulous work in contacting influential journalists and reputable media outlets. Everyone wanted to know what Clara Thompson's response would be after the public humiliation she suffered at the Global Tech Summit. Few, however, were prepared for what was about to unfold. Clara adjusted the microphone in front of her, her heart racing, but her expression calm. The room was packed with journalists and TV cameras. The warm lights and camera flashes created an almost claustrophobic atmosphere, but Clara had trained her mind not to be intimidated. She knew this was the decisive moment. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice firm and controlled. "Over the past few days, I've received many questions about what happened at the Global Tech Summit. As you all know, my company has been the target of insinuations and personal attacks that cast doubt on our ability to compete fairly. What no one knew until now is that these attacks were not spontaneous." Clara paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room. "We have obtained evidence that Richard Hale and his team orchestrated a deliberate campaign to undermine my credibility and that of Thompson Innovations. And it's not just about a business rivalry. This is an attempt to discredit me for who I am, not what I do." She looked at the reporters, many of whom were watching her with wide eyes. Some were typing furiously on their phones, already sending live updates. "This is the leaked email that proves this smear campaign," Clara continued, as the screen behind her displayed the incriminating email, projected in large, readable letters for everyone in the room. Murmurs began to fill the air as the journalists leaned forward, shocked by the brutality of the content. Clara waited a moment before proceeding. "This isn't just about me. This situation reflects a much bigger problem. When people like me, women, black people, minorities of any kind, start breaking barriers, we are often attacked not for our abilities, but for our identities. What Hale did is not an isolated incident. It's a reflection of a system that perpetuates racism and prejudice under the guise of healthy competition." The reporters were now fully engaged, some recording every word, while others were already formulating their questions. Clara knew she had control of the narrative at that moment, and continued. "I'm not here just to defend myself or my company. I'm here to demand change. The tech industry, like many others, needs to stop normalizing prejudice as a business practice. We will be suing Richard Hale and his company for defamation and unfair practices, but this goes far beyond a legal battle. This is about changing how we do business, how we treat each other, and ensuring that everyone has a fair chance to compete, regardless of their color, gender, or background." The questions started coming, but Clara was ready for each one. She answered calmly and clearly, outlining her next steps. The press loved a scandal, but Clara wasn't there to be seen as a victim. She wanted her story to be one of resilience and transformation. When the press conference ended, Clara sat for a moment on the empty stage, the noise still echoing in her mind. The nervousness had passed, and all that remained was determination. She knew the fight was just beginning. Jack approached, his expression relaxed but still alert. "You were incredible," he said, smiling. "This will resonate throughout the industry." "Let's see what happens now," Clara responded, not allowing herself to celebrate just yet. She knew Hale and his allies wouldn't back down easily. There were powerful forces at play, and the consequences of what she had just done would be felt for a long time. But at that moment, Clara didn't care. For the first time in weeks, she felt in control again. And now, the world knew exactly who she was, and what she was willing to do to protect what she had built. The impact of Clara's press conference was immediate. Within hours, the news of Richard Hale's sabotage dominated major tech and business outlets. Headlines screamed about the scandal. CEO exposed in racist campaign in tech industry, deliberate sabotage, the truth behind attacks on Thompson Innovations, and Clara Thompson calls out systemic bias in the industry. Clara knew she was about to face a storm of monumental proportions, but she also felt a strange inner peace. For the first time in weeks, the truth was on her side, and the whole world knew it. As the hours passed, social media began to explode. Some people were outraged by the revelations, showing solidarity with Clara. Others, however, still insisted on downplaying the impact of the sabotage, treating it as part of the dirty game of business. Clara knew that the subtle racism she faced wouldn't disappear overnight, but the mere fact that there was a public discussion was already a victory. But then, as if triggered by a shockwave, Richard Hale's allies began to move. Quickly, news emerged that Hale's company had hired one of the country's biggest PR firms to manage the crisis. Opinion pieces began to appear, suggesting that Clara was exaggerating or manipulating the narrative to benefit from the media attention. The counterattack had begun. Jack entered Clara's office carrying his laptop, his face tense. "Clara, you need to see this." He placed the laptop on the table, displaying a series of tweets and articles questioning Clara's integrity and accusing her of playing the race card to gain sympathy. Clara took a deep breath, already anticipating the backlash. "They're just playing their hand. They know the evidence is against them, so they're trying to attack my credibility." "Yeah, but they're gaining traction." Jack responded, frustrated. "Hale has put his PR machine to work. They're twisting the narrative and playing dirty. The impact of the press conference was positive, but this can turn around quickly if we're not careful." Clara watched the news screens, seeing her name and face debated as if she were a product on the market. Every detail of her career dissected, every move questioned. She was in the eye of the storm, but there was no room for fear now. Clara knew she had to move forward, not retreat. "Let's take the next step," Clara said, standing up from her chair with renewed determination. "We need to put pressure on Greencore. They know the truth, and they know that if they don't take a stand now, they'll find themselves in the middle of this chaos too." The call to Greencore was tense. Clara's team had carefully prepared what would be said, but when she picked up the phone, she decided she needed to be direct. "Look, you know what's happening here. Hale and his team aren't just playing dirty with me, they're playing with the integrity of our entire industry. You have a chance to take a stand now, to show that Greencore does not support these tactics." On the other end of the line, the silence was heavy. Greencore's CEO, David Klein, was known for being thoughtful, a man who rarely let emotions influence his business decisions. After a few moments, he finally responded. "Clara, we've been watching all of this closely. We know what happened at the Global Tech Summit was inappropriate, to say the least. But for us, this contract is about numbers and results." Clara knew Klein was trying to be cautious. It was the kind of response that avoided taking sides. But she also knew that if she let it slide, Hale would win. "David, with all due respect, the contract is about results. Yes, and Thompson Innovations has the results you're looking for. But this is also a matter of principles. Do you want to work with a company that sabotages its competitors based on prejudice? Because that's what you'll be doing if you give this contract to Hale." The silence on the other end of the line lingered, and for a moment, Clara feared the call had been lost. But then David Klein let out a heavy sigh. "I'll take this to the board, Clara, and I'll speak directly with Hale. This needs to be resolved soon, or we'll all suffer the consequences." Clara knew this was the most she could achieve for now, but still felt a wave of relief. The fact that Klein was willing to confront Hale was a sign that, maybe, her strategy was working. The following days were chaotic. The media continued to scrutinize every detail of the dispute, and social media was divided between those who supported Clara and those who defended Hale. Amidst all this, Clara received a message from an anonymous source. It was a second leaked email, this time containing a conversation between Hale and other executives, detailing not only plans to discredit Clara, but also to undermine other minority-owned businesses using the same tactics. It was the weapon Clara needed. With the new email in hand, Clara called another press conference, this time determined to bury any chance Hale had of recovering. When the second email was revealed, the reaction was immediate. Hale had crossed every imaginable line. The public now saw what Clara had seen from the start: a deliberate and systematic attempt to destroy competitors using racism and prejudice as weapons. This time, the pressure was unbearable. Within 48 hours, Richard Hale resigned from his position as CEO of his company, and a formal apology was issued by the public relations firm he had hired. Greencore, pressured from all sides, finally announced that they were severing any ties with Hale and considered Thompson Innovations the leading candidate for the contract. When Jack brought the news at the end of that day, Clara couldn't hold back a smile. "You did it, Clara. Greencore wants to sign the contract with Thompson Innovations." Clara closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the victory. It wasn't just about the contract, though that was a major achievement. It was about the sense of justice, knowing that the truth had finally prevailed, even against such powerful forces. But while she felt relief, she also knew her fight was far from over. The system that allowed Hale to act the way he did was still there, operating silently in the background. There was much more to do, but at that moment, Clara felt she had taken the first step on a long journey. "This is just the first battle," she said, looking at Jack. "Now we need to ensure this never happens to anyone else." The official announcement from Greencore arrived the next morning, direct and formal. Thompson Innovations had secured the contract. The news spread quickly, and within hours, the tech sector was buzzing. Clara had achieved the greatest victory of her career, not just for the billion-dollar contract, but for breaking a cycle of prejudice and manipulation that had dominated the industry for decades. The world now knew she was a force that could not be silenced. However, while headlines celebrated her victory, Clara knew this battle had left deep scars. The emotional and mental toll had been high, and she was now beginning to feel the weight of weeks, perhaps months, of accumulated tension. She had won, yes, but knew the true impact of the victory would only be measured over time. That day, as she entered Thompson Innovations, her team greeted her with applause. Many had followed her fight closely and knew what it meant, not only for the company, but for everyone who worked with her. Jack, always loyal by her side, approached with a relieved smile. "You did it, Clara, against all odds." She smiled, though there was a palpable exhaustion in her eyes. "I did," she replied, her voice softer than usual. "But Jack, this is just the beginning. We have a lot more work ahead of us." In the following days, Thompson Innovations began to reorganize to face the new challenge, turning the Greencore contract into a real and concrete project. But something in Clara was changing. The experience of battling Hale had shown her that her role in the tech sector was not just to be an innovator. She had a much larger responsibility now. The media continued to ask questions, eager to know more about Clara's future plans. She responded politely, always focusing on the importance of the contract and her company's mission. But deep down, Clara was preparing something bigger. A few weeks after the victory, Clara decided to call a meeting with her executive team. When everyone was gathered in the conference room, she began to speak, her tone firmer than ever. "I know we're all focused on the Greencore contract, and that is, without a doubt, our priority right now. But beyond that, there's something I need to do. What we faced with Richard Hale was not an isolated incident. Racism and prejudice are systemic in our industry, and this was just one battle in a much larger war." She looked at each of her executives, noting the expression of surprise on some faces, but also the silent support in others. I'm going to launch an initiative to support and invest in startups founded by women, Black people, and other minorities who constantly face the same barriers I faced. We're going to create a fund dedicated to ensuring these companies have the same opportunities we had. It's not enough just to win this fight for myself. We need to open the doors for others. Jack was the first to speak. This is incredible, Clara, but it's also risky. We're taking on a big contract now. Do you think we can handle all this at the same time? Clara looked at him with a determined gaze. I know it's risky, but nothing we've achieved so far has come without risk. If we don't do this, if we don't take advantage of this victory to transform the industry, then what was all the sacrifice for? The silence in the room was tense, but also filled with admiration. Clara knew her team understood what was at stake. They had been by her side during the worst parts of the dispute with Hale, and now they were ready to follow her on a new mission. In the following months, Clara dedicated herself both to the Green Core project and to the investment fund. She began gathering entrepreneurs, investors, and allies in her mission to change the face of technology. The fund, named Tech for All, was announced with great enthusiasm and immediately attracted the support of several influential figures in the industry. Tech for All was not just a symbolic gesture. It was a promise that the future of technology would be more inclusive, more fair, and that talent would be valued above all else. The initiative began to gain prominence in major media outlets, and Clara was quickly recognized not only as a business leader, but as an activist within the sector. People began to seek her guidance, asking for advice on how to navigate the traps of a system that still kept so many people out. Clara became a symbol of resilience and overcoming, and her story began to inspire a new generation of entrepreneurs. However, Clara's fight was not without challenges. Some still saw her victory as a fluke, believing her new mission was just a passing trend. But Clara, now stronger than ever, knew this resistance was the last gasp of a dying system. One day, while reviewing the investment fund reports, Jack walked into her office with a thoughtful expression. "Do you realize what you've done?" he asked, crossing his arms as he watched her work. Clara looked up, confused. "What have I done?" "You've changed the narrative. What Hale tried to do, all the prejudice you faced, it's irrelevant now. You didn't just win, Clara, you changed the game. Now everyone wants to know what you'll do next." She smiled slightly, realizing that indeed, the impact of her fight was much greater than any contract or financial success. She had changed how the industry saw her. More importantly, she had changed how many people saw themselves. Her fight had not just been for her own justice, but for all those who, like her, were constantly underestimated and excluded. Clara closed the report she was reading and looked out the window of her office toward the city skyline. She knew the work was just beginning, but for the first time in a long while, she felt truly in control. The Tech for All launch event was grand. The hall, filled with business people, investors, journalists, and young entrepreneurs, was lit with a glow of hope and expectation. Clara Thompson, now not only a recognized leader in technology, but a true pioneer of social transformation in the sector, was the center of attention. She stood on the stage, feeling the positive energy from the crowd. In front of her were people who saw her as more than a successful businesswoman. They saw her as an inspiration, a spokesperson for the changes the world needed. She, who had been underestimated, humiliated, and attacked, was now determined to pave the way for others who, like her, wanted to change the game. "Today is not just about me or Thompson Innovations," Clara began, her voice calm and confident, echoing through the hall. "Today is about all those who have been left behind. About all the great ideas that never had a chance because they came from people the system decided didn't belong." The applause that followed was intense. Clara felt a tightness in her chest, not from anxiety, but from fulfillment. She had fought so hard to get there, and now the world was hearing her message. She continued, with the passion she always carried, "Tech for All is more than an investment fund. It's a commitment to transform our industry from the inside out. We can no longer allow talent to be wasted because someone doesn't fit the preconceived mold of what an innovator should be. Everyone here knows what it's like to fight to be heard. And from today, the fight won't be solitary anymore." She paused, looking at the audience full of young and determined faces, remembering how she herself had felt years ago when fighting to prove her worth. I want you all to know that together, we can change the rules of the game. We won't wait for the industry to accept us. We will shape the future in our image. Once again, the applause echoed, and Clara smiled. There, in that moment, she felt a palpable change, not just in the industry, but in the hearts of the people. Her goal had ceased to be merely personal. It was now a collective movement. After the event, Clara retreated to the building's terrace, where the city view stretched for miles. The night was quiet, and for the first time in a long while, she had a moment of silence to reflect. She felt the cold wind against her skin, and a slight smile crossed her lips. Jack appeared beside her, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to Clara, and with a nod, toasted to the horizon. "We did it," he said, his voice full of pride. Clara took a sip of the drink, tasting victory, but also the weight of what was yet to come. "We did," she replied, looking at the city lights twinkling in the distance. "But the real change, it's just beginning." Jack laughed. "You can never relax, can you?" "Not after everything that happened," she responded thoughtfully. "What Hale tried to do, the prejudice that exists in every corner of this industry, it's all still there. Just because we won a victory doesn't mean the system has completely changed. But now we have an opportunity." She turned to Jack, her gaze determined. "People are looking at us, Jack. They're expecting something more, and we can't fail. Tech for All isn't just a fund, it's the foundation for the future." Jack nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. "You're right. What you did with Hale opened a door that will never be closed. Now everyone knows things can be different." Clara smiled, but she knew the fight was far from over. The real revolution would be ensuring that others like her had the opportunities that had always been denied to them. It wouldn't be easy, but she was ready for it. There was a fire inside her, something that had grown with each attack, each humiliation, and now that fire couldn't be extinguished. A few months later, Clara was back in her office, observing the continued success of Thomson Innovations. The contract with Greencore had been a milestone, but it was just the beginning of a series of new projects and partnerships that were emerging. Thomson Innovations was now a global powerhouse, respected for its technological innovation and the social impact it was starting to have on the industry. Tech for All had already funded several startups led by women and minorities, and each of them represented a new step toward a more inclusive future. Clara had started to see the fruits of her fight. Companies that, before, would have been ignored were now becoming benchmarks in the sector. The fight wasn't over. There was still prejudice, there was still resistance, and Clara knew that each new achievement would be accompanied by new challenges. But now, she wasn't alone. She had a community of innovators by her side, people ready to follow her example and transform the sector based on merit and talent, not on who they were or where they came from. That night, as she left the office, Clara looked up at the starry sky above. There was a whole world waiting to be transformed, and she knew her journey was just beginning. But this time, the journey would be lighter because she wasn't just walking for herself. She was paving the way for thousands who would come after her. And that, for Clara, was the greatest victory of all. And what did you think of this story? Share your opinion in the comments. We really want to know what you thought. Your participation is very important to us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more narratives like this one. Thank you for watching.